From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. Thousands of demonstrators took to the streets in Ecuador on Wednesday night against new austerity measures announced by President Lenin Moreno. Among the measures is the end of state subsidies for diesel and regular fuel, nearly doubling prices of the former. Mass layoffs, a monthly family bonus of $15, and the renewal of short-term contracts with a 20% reduction in pay were also part of the announcements. These austerity measures are part of the government's deal with the International Monetary Fund ahead of the next disbursement of a $4.2 billion loan.
We are here to strongly reject the neoliberal policies of the government of Lenin Moreno. Ecuadorians, it is time to come together, to join forces in order to provide guidelines to the disastrous government of Moreno.
The economic measures implemented by President Moreno are clearly in complicity with the International Monetary Fund, but also with businessmen. Today they are celebrating because the labor reform that is coming is not trying to resolve the workers' right or unemployment. What it is trying to do is worsen the workers' conditions.
So to discuss all that's been happening in Ecuador over the past couple of days, we spoke with Citizens Revolution lawmaker Esther Cuesta Santana.
First of all, these economic measures will really affect the middle class, the popular classes, the working class, the small businesses, basically because by increasing the price of oil, of diesel, necessarily everything will increase. That means the food will increase, the prices will increase of the food, of transportation, of passengers, of our cargo, and obviously the workers will have less money to consume. The salaries will decrease. The president announced also that the salaries will be decreased by 20%, which is a lot for workers and particularly for workers in the public service. The mobilization is extending all over the country. It started in the province of Carchi for a series of reasons of abandonment by the government, not fulfilling the promises. And now it's really increasing to Quito, to Bolivar, to Sucumbíos. And what we see is this spontaneous resistance of citizens. We will not accept all these political measures that will impoverish people, impoverish, again, the middle classes, the working classes, and the most vulnerable people in our country. I would say it's very demagogic. You know, the president said yesterday that he will not increase the VAT, which is, you know, let's not be surprised that it will be increased in the next few months, maybe next year, because it's part of the compromises that the government made with the IMF.
The Brazilian Supreme Court decided to accept a decision which could mean the revision of dozens of sentences from the Lava Jato operation. With 7 votes in favor and 4 against, the decision may cause the reversal of 143 sentences out of the 162. Among those is that of former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian May, has the details.
In Brasilia tonight, the Supreme Court just upheld a decision from the second working group from last Wednesday, which, if it's carried through properly, will end up reversing around 70% of the convictions in the now disgraced Lava Jato investigation, which was overseen by the current Justice Minister, former Judge Sergio Moro, who's been revealed through The Intercept, through these leaked Telegram conversations, to have collaborated illegally with prosecution to put the former President Lula in jail, even though they knew they had no evidence against him. This ruling by the Supreme Court means that in cases where plea bargain testimony was coerced, where they arrested businessmen and then only let them out of jail after they changed their testimony, which appears to be the case in around 70% of the Lava Jato convictions, the defendant has to have the right to the final word of defense. and this wasn't respected in many of the cases, including Lula's second conviction over the Itaibaya vacation property. So, although it doesn't have direct effect on Lula getting out of jail, for example, soon in the near future, it's just one more thing that's discrediting the entire Lava Jato investigation. As pressure builds from all over the world to free Lula, it's just one more chink in this defense of this investigation that's basically now been proven to be indefensible.
That was our correspondent, Bramir, with that report. Thousands of protesters gathered in May 5th Square in Mexico on Wednesday to commemorate 51 years since the Tlatelolco massacre. On October 2nd, hundreds of student protesters and passers-by were killed by military and police forces who opened fire on the almost 10,000-strong march. Students, social leaders and survivors participated in an event across Mexico City in remembrance of the massacre. During this protest, there were some moments of tension between the police and demonstrators, but no major incidents occurred.
Exactly. There's impunity which is covering up this crime and many others that previous governments had committed. And we're seeing that they're calling this a transformation. But the new armed force has been created, the National Guard, and it's made up of people from the armed forces that haven't been tried for the crimes they've committed.
As survivors, we have the duty to ensure that this is remembered, and with that, we keep the memory alive. It's not just because we were victims. The people themselves were the victims. We don't know how many died, but we know it was an act of genocide.
Judicial workers in Colombia decided to start a 48-hour strike on Wednesday. For his part, the executive secretary of the union coordinator of the judicial branch announced that a 48-hour strike will be held in the courts and prosecutors' offices in the 32 departments across the country. On Wednesday 2nd and Thursday 3rd October, more than 55 judicial officials will suspend their activities in the country. The union leader stated that they are concerned about the overcrowding workers' experience in the country's courts. He further noted that the commitments made in the strike 2 months ago have not been enacted, increasing uneasiness among officials. Shifting gears now, the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, has said that the country will continue to strengthen the defensive partnership between Cuba and the Bolivarian Republic.
My Chief General, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, is working to continue our military and intelligence cooperation with Cuba in order to strengthen Venezuela's capacity for defense and the defense of Cuba. We will continue cooperating economically because, in the end, as you said, we love our brave union and we will be victorious, together Cuba and Venezuela.
In the wake of accusations by the U.S. Attorney's Office against the president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, for his alleged links to drug trafficking, Honduran citizens protested on the outskirts of New York's Southern District, demanding his immediate exit from power. The group of Hondurans demonstrated during the trial against Tony Hernandez, brother of President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who is accused of drug trafficking, arms trafficking, and conspiracy against the United States. On the opening day of the trial, the prosecutor's office revealed that the president allegedly received millions in bribes from El Chapo Guzman and other drug traffickers. Our correspondent in Tegucigalpa, Gilda Silvastrucci, has more on the story.
Today is the first day of the trial against José Antonio Hernandez, better known as Tony Hernandez, the brother of the president, Juan Orlando Hernandez. The most important part of the day was the accusations against the Honduran leader, stating that he received $1 million from Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, as well as other amounts of money from different criminal groups in order to finance his political campaign. Among all of this, we have to remember that Tony Hernandez is being investigated for drug trafficking, falsification of testimony and trafficking arms, and beyond this, the murder of 2 people. What's to be expected now is the presentation of evidence against Mr. Hernandez and the presentation of the other people that have been accused in the case, including Mr. Alexander Ardon, who was the mayor of El Paraíso in the west of Honduras. Also accused is Juan Orlando Hernandez, so there are a number of authority figures involved in the case.
That was Gilda Silvastrucci with that report. Dengue outbreaks are spreading across the globe thanks to a perfect storm of climate change. Honduras has by far the highest death rate from the mosquito-borne illness in Latin America. So far for 2019, the country has recorded 144 dengue deaths.
It's the worst epidemic of the disease the country has ever experienced, with an estimated 81,000 cases of severe dengue reported, and that's only so far for the year. Of the more than 140 dengue deaths, nearly two-thirds are children under the age of 10.
I was there with him, unable to sleep because he himself can't sleep, since his blood would flow out if he leans on his back. Also, when he sneezes, blood clots come out of his nose.
The dengue fever cases are expected to increase due to the onset of the rainy season.
We are talking about 1,377 dengue cases so far this year. It's the children who are always the most adversely affected.
Some in the medical sector believe the situation could have been brought under control since the beginning of this year, but technical personnel were isolated, and they say privatization of some hospitals made matters worse.
The death toll from this disease that can be controlled, yet we see that is climbing. Let's remember that back in 2018, there were a little more than 5,000 cases. This year alone, we already have more than 81,000 cases. The death toll is alarming.
Public hospitals in Honduras are overflowing with the enormous dengue caseloads. There are over 100,000 patients, and each hospital has an average of 78 beds alone. Affected families are turning to a higher authority as they keep hope alive for their sick loved ones.
I feel so distressed for my son because he's lost a lot of blood, but we have to have faith in God because he's the one who helps us.
Honduras' public health system has been ailing for some time. There have been reports that only half of the 31 hospitals around the country are actually fully functioning. However, Governor Juan Hernandez defended the integrity of those institutions.
We have invested in an all-inclusive, equitable, high-quality, fair, and decent health system. It's no easy work. We are struggling, but still pushing ahead.
Most of the country's dengue fever-related deaths have been recorded in the north, where a permanent state of emergency has been declared.
Coming up, Nigeria's president is visiting South Africa on the heels of xenophobic violence in both countries. Don't go anywhere.
Discover the cultural diversity that defines a continent. The place where art and tradition are part of the same nucleus. Artistic explorations, values, and more. Real life. Fridays. Only on Tuesday.
Welcome back. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has arrived in South Africa for a state visit. This comes after an outburst of xenophobic violence in and around Johannesburg stirred tensions between Africa's leading economic powerhouses. Our correspondent in Johannesburg, Matuba Malachi, has all the details.
This is the first state visit by President Muhammadu Buhari of Nigeria to South Africa since he was re-elected for his second term in February. It's also a first visit since 2013 of a Nigerian president to South Africa. And this visit comes at a very tricky time for political relations between the two countries, as South Africa is still recovering from xenophobic attacks and where Nigerians were affected as well. We even saw Nigerian nationals being repatriated back home because of attacks on migrants that just happened several weeks ago here in South Africa. And no doubt this will be on the agenda now when President Cyril Ramaphosa and President Muhammadu Buhari of Nigeria meet today. But we've heard the South African president extending his apology to African states, even sending envoys around the continent to tell them that South Africa isn't xenophobic. And Nigeria has responded saying that they accept South Africa's apology. And this meeting between President Ramaphosa and President Buhari it was preceded by the meeting between the foreign ministers of the two countries on Wednesday, and that set the tone for what's going to be spoken about. The two major economies on the African continent will meet today, and no doubt there'll be trade deals that will be renewed. And also knowing that President Buhari is on his second term, he's renewing his commitment to relations with various countries around the continent here in Africa. It's back to you, studio.
That was Matuba Malaji with that report. The two-day Somalia Partnership Forum has come to an end in Mogadishu with a resolution to expedite the country's recovery and peace building. Representatives from 50 countries attended the forum, which started on Tuesday. The event focused on the country's recent developments and the challenges that lie ahead as the country rebuilds after decades of armed conflict and climate-related concerns. The recovery plan will be implemented in the next 12 to 15 months with support of the United Nations envoy to the East African country.
As part of the Somali social reform, the government has successfully mobilized Somali resources to initiate a nationwide program of rebuilding key institutions in the country. In the coming times, we'll work on narrowed priorities, including holding open and fair elections and ensuring a peaceful transition.
The Tunisian Electoral Commission has announced that the country's presidential election runoff would take place on October 13th. Political parties will start campaigning from Thursday for the second and final round of voting, which will see imprisoned media mogul Nabil Karoui face off against independent law professor Kais Saied. This comes as Tunisia's court had rejected a fresh request for Karoui's release from prison before the elections take place. He has been detained since August 23rd on charges of money laundering and tax evasion.
ESIE has made every possible effort in regards to this subject. However, our commitment to obtaining the results of the elections within the deadlines specified by the Constitution obliges us to proceed and that everyone handles its responsibilities.
The Libyan Coast Guard has rescued 102 migrants on their way to Italy from a rubber boat 70 miles off the coast of Al-Qums. The International Medical Corps said the migrants who have been safely brought to a processing point include 3 women and a child. The rest were men of different nationalities, mostly from Sudan, Eritrea, Mali, and Ivory Coast. They were given medical assistance by the organization before being released.
Today we received the news that a boat was rescued by the Coast Guard of the Libyan coast near Qums. The number that they managed to save is 100 or 102 migrants, including 3 women and a child. The rest were men of different nationalities, mostly from Sudan, Eritrea, Mali, and Ivory Coast. Their health was very good. Most were attended to, although some of them were ill, having headaches and toothaches, so they used medical.
In other news, families of soldiers killed in a suspected jihadist attack held a protest to demand answers from the government. Wives and children of soldiers based in Buleski said they had no information on the fate of their family members. They gathered in front of the parachutist commando base in Bamako and demanded answers from the government.
We demand the authorities to give information on the situation of our parents who are based in Bolkesi. We also demand our soldiers be equipped according to the mission they are assigned to. Otherwise, we will stop any reinforcement, leaving this camp to go north.
Now this comes after 25 soldiers were killed and 6 remain missing after suspected jihadists attacked 2 army camps in central Mali. According to a government statement, the army has launched a joint operation in response to the attack with forces from neighboring Burkina Faso backed up by French troops stationed in the region. The toll is the highest suffered by Malian forces this year as they struggle to contain militant groups. We're taking one last break. When we return, clashes in Iraq has left 5 dead and hundreds injured. Details after this.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur. A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis, and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en I.
Dot in the eye. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. At least 5 people have died and another 200 were wounded after police repressed protests in various cities. Thousands of people demonstrated against unemployment, corruption, and poor public services provided by the Iraqi government. Police forces opened fire on the protesters and repressed the demonstration with tear gas. The spokesperson for the Interior Ministry said that a child died on Wednesday when a protester threw a bottle of gasoline against a vehicle in Baghdad. Another child was killed in the southern city of Imara, and a further protester died because of injuries received on Tuesday. The Iraqi Prime Minister has declared a curfew in Baghdad after a second day of protests and police repression. The restrictions will remain in place until further notice. Curfews had already been declared in 3 other cities.
Despite the curfew, we are going out to protest, to call for our rights. We want to change the regime. They have arrested our people. They have done things to our people they did not even do to Daesh. They have beat them up and humiliated them while firing live ammunition. What did we do? Are we suicide bombers? We are here to call for our rights.
The German Chancellor declared this Wednesday that her country expects an organized exit of the United Kingdom from the European Union. However, she said preparations have been made should no withdrawal agreement be reached.
Of course, we've talked about the exit of the United Kingdom from the European Union, specifically the fact that we still want a solution along with an agreement. An organized exit from the United Kingdom but both nations have prepared for a contradictory scenario.
Employees fired by the Thomas Cook airline in the United Kingdom protested alongside Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn to demand answers about the company's dissolution. The workers marched on Parliament to deliver a letter calling for an investigation to be opened into the business's failure. They also said that Thomas Cook must pay them the wages they are owed. Thomas Cook stopped operations on September 23rd after declaring bankruptcy.
I'm a year, 2 years away from retirement, so I won't be able to get another job flying. It just won't happen for me. I'm part-time. Part-time positions are not available when you go to a new airline, so that won't happen.
This Wednesday in France, thousands of police marched against President Emmanuel Macron's government due to the wave of police suicides and deplorable working conditions. Thousands of French police officers rallied together in Paris for a march of anger, decrying poor working conditions and anti-police hostility, which many of them say is on the rise. In the first police strike in France since 2001, demonstrators marched from Bastille Square to Republic Square in response to growing anti-police sentiment linked to the Yellow Vest protests, a wave of suicides and proposed pension reforms.
We're a bit like the Yellow Vests of the police. We're both demanding greater purchasing power, better working conditions, a proper retirement plan, to be able to retire in good conditions and in good health. So yes, at its root, we had a lot of things in common with the Yellow Vests when they started their movement.
After the protest, I hope there will be a roundtable discussion to achieve concrete things, especially on the recuperation of extra hours, on which at the moment we get a couple dozen euros and are told, here you go, be happy with this. We are not happy with this, because every Saturday we have no families. We spend every weekend at Yellow Vest protests, and college no longer get to see their kids grow up.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.